Hey guys, welcome back to the Alchemy of Self podcast with your host, Rome Za. I'm here with a very, very special guest. He is a pioneer of physical culture in the United States. He's currently a 6th-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, one of the pioneers of kettlebells and all types of other incredible physical training. And he is the man that wrapped the black belt around my waist. I'm here with the man, the legend, Steve Maxwell. Hello, Professor.
Thank you for the generous introduction.
Well, I mean, you know, I think introductions are very important. And I also think that I undershot that one because realistically, you have made such a big impact on physical culture in the United States that I don't know if three of us can do the proper introduction for what you have done in the US for physical culture. Um, s my first question to you is, how did you get into physical culture?
Well, it's interesting because um, my dad was a U.S. World War II Navy veteran who actually lied about his age to get into the Navy at the outbreak of the war. He wanted to escape the family farm in West Virginia, where they were very rural. Like he lived like in Amish. They didn't even have electricity, and he just wanted to get off the farm, man. So he in the Navy, he was quite adept with his fists. It was he was the Pacific Fleet bantamweight boxing champ. They used to have like these matches with Marines and sailors, and they would put a ring on one of the one of the larger ships, like either a battleship or an aircraft carrier or something. And then all the ships would come around. The guys would stand up in the rigging to watch these matches, just to keep morale high. And he was pretty good, because he had boxed from the time he was just a kid down in the farm with his buddies. In fact, I inherited those horsehair filled gloves, and they were all raggedy by the time my brother and I got them. So, they had like little holes. You'd get a mouthful of horsehair now. Pretty good. Anyway, long story short, he tried to teach me and my brother boxing. I wasn't particularly adept at boxing, didn't like it. And I was also getting bullied quite a bit by the older boys. My brother and I were like two of the youngest boys in the neighborhood. Most of the other kids were a couple grades above, and boys will be boys. So he wanted me to learn how to defend myself and stand up for myself. So when he saw that I wasn't really cut out for boxing per se, uh, he insisted, literally made me try out for wrestling in 7th grade, and I found I was pretty good at it. As a small kid, wasn't particularly strong. At the same time, he had bought me a barbell from York Barbell Company. I grew up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and the York Barbell Company was just down the road, not too far away. And it was very famous as the center of physical culture. So at the same time, he was buying me fitness magazines. Back in those days, the bodybuilding magazines were much more innocent than today's steroid monster things. The guys were still look somewhat normal. I mean, strong, well built, but nothing like today. And the whole thing of physical culture, it wasn't just about lifting weights. The guys would do gymnastics. They would do weightlifting as a sport. They would do regular bodybuilding exercises. Many of them in their posing routines would do things like splits or backflips, and it was all pretty pure.
Mm.
And that was the kind of culture I grew up in. And once I started wrestling and lifting the uh, barbell set my dad bought me, uh, I went from getting my ass kicked to being feared. Not that I went out of my way to, bully people, but people knew I wouldn't mess around. Fight started,
Incredible.
I made sure I ended it.
Incredible. Incredible. Did you have mentors growing up?
Yes, I did. a high school principal, not from, I'm sorry, an elementary school principal who was not the principal of my elementary school, but he was a deacon in the church that I grew up in. He taught me Olympic weightlifting and other barbell exercises. He had been involved for years and years and years and years. And then there was another guy who was a PIAA ref. His name was Glenn Flegel. Very bombastic, real showboat guy. He used to put on a show when he was referee. Some people didn't like him, but I always, he was also a member of my church and a elementary school teacher. And he showed me a lot of wrestling holds when I was young, me and my brother, and showed us a lot of conditioning work when we were coming up. So I had some pretty good guys. And of course, then later, my high school wrestling coach was a big influence. He was that's just at the beginning when weight training was becoming an accepted norm. Up to that point, people were either forbidden to, athletes were forbidden to lift weights or highly discouraged under the idea that you would make you slow or muscle bound or all these crazy ideas. So my high school wrestling coach was very big on proper scientific weight training. We actually had like, remember the old power racks?
Mm-hmm.
The old York power racks? You might be too young, but they're pretty simple affairs. A lot of people don't realize they weren't made for power lifting. The power rack was made for isometric holds, static holds with a barbell. They would have set on the supports. There was holes, and these rods would go through, and you would set one rod a couple inches above the lower rod with the bar in between. Then you load it, and then you would lift and hold the bar against the pin, and then you would adjust it different levels. That was uh, that was very popular. The isometric holds were huge back in the '60s.
Incredible. So you've been in the physical culture industry for a while. Like, how did you know this was going to be your thing? Like, how did you know like this is my thing? Like, I'm going to do this for life.
It's interesting. I just really admired my high school coaches. My coach Bill Woods, my wrestling coach, who's also was the JV football coach. I just liked him a lot. He always uh, he spent a lot of time, kind of a mentor, as you say. And I don't know, I just really liked that whole physical education field. And once I started lifting weights, I excelled in a lot of physical feats of strength. Even though I wasn't a big boy and kind of relatively small, I was pretty strong for my size. And someone asked me even when I was 12 years old what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said I wanted to teach physical education. I wanted to be a gym teacher and possibly a wrestling coach. So I knew that when I was 12.
Incredible. So since you did you actually teach in the gym, like in the school setting, in the education system?
I graduated with a degree in both health and physical education
Mm.
from Westchester State College, which is now Westchester University. I don't think they even call it PE anymore. I think they call it kinesiology or
Mhm.
something, some fancy term. It's basically PE. And when I graduated, there was no jobs. There was a glut for teaching jobs. I went to a couple interviews, and at this one junior high school outside of the airport circle in Philly, a little place called Fallcroft. What was it? I can't even remember. The little township school. It was the Southeast Delco School District, and they were looking for a junior high PE teacher. And when I walked into the interview room, there's like 8 guys I graduated with, all sitting there. And I thought, oh shit, I don't have a ghost of a chance with all this. But the principal liked me and hired me out of all the guys. I'm not sure what it was, you know. But up to that point, after I graduated with my degree, I actually got a job working at a local prison as the recreational director. Boy, that was some job. I was a naive kid. You know, I went to, because I was born December 3rd, 1952, I was always like a year younger than most of the people that I went to school with. So when I graduated high school, I was 17. So I was a freshman in college at 17 years old. So that was kind of strange. So when I graduated from college, I was still really young. And I was this naive guy in a prison setting with virtually no training on how to deal with prisoners. It was pretty bizarre, man. But I quickly realized I didn't want to be in that environment then. That really was, it was not good. Very threatening individuals in there. So when I got my job in the junior high school, it was almost as bad. The kids were crazy, man. And no one, even then, this is back in the 70s. There was no accountability even then. Parents would come in and fight you tooth and nail for anything, you know, poor little Johnny or poor little Susie. Yeah, it wasn't even near the political correctness now, but even then, it was really crazy liberal. And kids are just getting away with all sorts of crazy stuff. Give an example. I started teaching uh, sex education. That's what they used to call it in those days. I don't think that's politically correct anymore. They probably have some fancy term for sex ed. But the parents fought me tooth and nail. Not all of them, but there was three mothers in particular that were just infuriated. They thought that was something that is private, should be taught at home. Their daughters were embarrassed. But that same year I started, there was two girls. They got pregnant, and there was a case of venereal disease amongst these seventh, eighth, and ninth graders. That's crazy, right? It's like the kids just didn't know the facts.
It's crazy.
So, you know, and I almost got fired. You got these women vehemently announced me and just thought it was terrible that I was teaching basically the basic biological facts of life to these seventh and eighth graders.
I just did a podcast last week comparing the school system to the prison system and how, like, where I grew up in New York, our schools look just like the prisons. Like if you visit Rikers Island and you visit a high school, the shape is the same, the gates are very similar, the barred windows. So it, it's no coincidence that there was a comparison there.
Yeah, I mean, like the junior high school I went to, it looks like an old castle. Like it could very well have been, you know, a prison.
What has changed in the industry since you've been in the industry?
Well, I think social media and you know Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you know X, all these have really made a huge impact. Up to that point, you really had to read books to get knowledge. And now you can go on the internet, interweb or whatever, and there's all this stuff at your fingertips. But here's the problem. A lot of people, when they go, they don't have any discernment. They have no way to determine whether the information is good information, neutral information, or just really bad information because they have no background. And what they're basing almost all their opinions on is how good does the person look that is putting the information out. If it's a really good looking, shapely woman with a really awesome figure, the women automatically assume she knows what she's talking about. And if the guy has an incredible definition and shredded abs and large and muscular, people assume he must know what he's talking about also. And unfortunately, nothing could be further from the truth. Many times these people look the way they are in spite of what they do, not because of. And many are relatively ill, and you wouldn't know to look at them. Many of these influencers lead relatively short lives. You read about it all the time in the paper. I don't even want to get started. Well, we can talk about it, but the vaccine really messed a lot of people up. But yeah, just because a guy looks the part doesn't necessarily mean he knows how you should train.
Yeah,
And you
agreed.
have to be very careful with that
Yeah, the
because a lot of
Chinese.
these guys they have no clue how to work out just normal people.
Yeah, I mean the Chinese had a saying. It was like like healthy and strong looking on the outside, but rotting on the inside.
It can't be. I used, generally speaking, you would think if a guy could build that kind of musculature and look good, you would think he would be healthy. But a lot of times, not so. A lot of times they burn like burn out pretty quick
Yeah,
because of the kind of stresses they're putting on themselves.
which leads me to my next question. What do you attribute right now? How old are you now?
I'll be 72 in 6 months.
So you're going to be 72. We've trained together. You're strong as fuck. You're super technical. And you're also very sharp. Like you still have like a physicality that you can use on the mats and also lifting weights and physical training. Um, and most people in their 20s don't have that anymore. So my question to you is, what do you attribute to your longevity?
Well, I had a mentor in the physical training business, and it's a real shame because he didn't live real long himself. He had some serious problems with his marriage, and I think it killed him early. So, if you're stuck in a bad relationship, that can shave years, if not decade, off your life being involved like that. And it wasn't even with his wife, but one of the things that always impressed me about him was he said, "Hey, Steve, I'm playing the long game." He said, anyone could be something in their 50s, 60s, but very few people can be something in their 70s, 80s, or 90s. You never see it. Very rarely. Occasionally, you know, especially not the 80s or 90s. Rarely do you see anyone that has any kind of real physicality. And when you do see them, they're a rarity. And so that was my plan. Play the long game. How do you play the long game? Well, you got to really watch what you eat, diet. Now, people argue and argue and argue about the proper diet. But very few people will argue with the fact that we need a lot of water. Occasionally, you'll see nuts talk about, you know, going dry fast, and stuff like that. But for the most part, almost everyone universally agrees you need water, you need macronutrients. The argument then becomes what amount and what proportions and so forth. You definitely need plenty of sleep. Most people are sleep deprived, usually because they're too overstimulated. And everyone will agree that you need exercise of some form or another. Fresh air, sunlight, two others. So if you're fulfilling those things, you're going to be in really good health. As far as diet, I think there's any number of diets that people can follow. The most important aspect would be not to overeat. If you're overweight or over fat, then obviously you're eating too much. And there's never been in the history of man a person that could not lose weight if they cut their calories down and increase their activity. Everyone's convinced now that they have some kind of metabolic syndrome, they can't lose weight, and that they are the exception, you know, to the rule. But there's never been a single study where they put people into lockdown wards and monitored everything they would eat and drink. Every single one of them, when they were put on a deficit, would lose body fat. Physiologically impossible not to. Even if you have thyroid condition or this or that, you'll still lose weight if you cut your calories. Period. Now, as far as keeping bone mass and muscular strength, you absolutely need some form of resistance training. But it doesn't seem to matter. It can be lifting weights, barbells, machines. It could be body weight exercises. It can be isometrics. Doesn't really matter. What does matter is your form and your technique. I've seen people literally destroy themselves with the weights. And I was unfortunately allowed myself to get pulled into thinking at one point I was indestructible. And I started messing around with club bells and kettlebells because they were kind of fun. It was kind of exciting. I think I might have been going through a midlife crisis. I was looking for something different. Uh, I didn't want to admit that I had probably reached my genetic peak, and I was looking for something different. And while I did excel in those things, I quickly found that it's a very good way to erode joint health, and you can make yourself, uh, yeah, you can cripple yourself with that stuff, even if you're using good form. It's just the momentum-based movement patterns.
Agreed.
I just realized that it was a mistake, and many people that I started with kettlebells, club bells, maces, uh, have lived to regret it, and I was really truly sorry about that. But I've become very vocal. It was a mistake. Should have never done it. I don't think it has. I mean, okay, you may see some old guy that defies the odds, still swinging his mace bell or his club bells or whatever. But I guarantee if you keep that up for about a decade or more, you're going to have some serious joint issues. You will. Can't help it.
Yeah. Like you might look great, but what else can't you do afterwards? Right?
Well,
That's really what happens, you know?
I seriously impaired my shoulders for that stuff. And it's supposed to be a fixed for shoulders, but I did not find that to be true. It was, and believe me, I used really good form or technique according to the protocols. But, you know,
So this leads me into the next question. Now that you're going to be 72 and you've been doing this for a really long time, I would say almost forever. What has changed in your training?
well, I started embracing isometrics more. I always liked it. There was a time where was very much into yoga, and I liked it a lot. And I really like the static holds of yoga because yoga, as you know, can be pretty strenuous.
Yeah.
You can give yourself a serious strength workout with certain poses and holds. And I always liked it. And I thought that, and it also helped my bunged up shoulders from the other stuff that I did. And it was a very short hop from yoga back to what I had done in my youth, isometric hold. And boy, I'll tell you, uh, the combination of yoga with static holds can be fantastic. You can take any basic yoga class and you can make it a real strength workout if you know how. I mean, just holding a crescent lunge, woo-hoo, and holding chaturanga or holding downward dog or doing what they call Hindu push-ups, slow and smooth, not the high rep fast stuff, which is another point I wanted to make. There's this idea that you must lift explosively and fast to be explosive to recruit fast twitch muscle fibers. That's simply not true. And there's nothing in the literature to support that at all. If you want to be fast in an activity or explosive, you must do that specific activity. Doing clapping push ups, for example, or doing kettlebell snatches will not make your punch more explosive. It won't. It's called specificity of exercise. You only get good at what you're specifically doing. And the more skill an exercise takes, like a kettlebell snatch, high level skill, the more skill, like Olympic barbell lifts, for example, a lot of skill, the less transfer it has to anything else. Yes, the strength part of it transfers, but there's much better ways to build the strength. And then you do the specific skill you want to be good at over and over again, repeatedly. Slow at first, building up speed so you can just, explode into that particular skill. I'm thinking maybe right now like judo throw. Doing kettlebell swings will not make your hip throw any better. Okay, there's some strength transfer. You'd be better off doing slow deadlifts or good morning or even back extension. And then you practice with your partner. Hopefully, you have a crash pad so guy doesn't have to take too many break balls. And you just start out slow, get the feel, build up the speed, and over time you just boom, explode into it. And that would be any martial skill or
Yeah.
anything you want to be fast or explosive. Same thing for punches, whatever. But a lot of people have it backwards. Some people argue to the death that they're specifically recruiting best fits muscle fiber, or well, I did this and my jump improved. I'm not saying that those other lifts don't improve you. I'm just saying it's not the best way to do it, and it's certainly not good for long term over time.
Yeah, I was just thinking, there's a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can make you better today, tomorrow, a year from now. Like kettlebells will improve stuff for you in the next
Absolutely, you'll get
year or
stronger.
two. But 20
You
years
can.
from now, you're gonna fucking be crying about it significantly because your joint. I mean, jujitsu I mean, all combat martial arts, but especially jujitsu, judo, wrestling. It's so detrimental to the joints by itself. So we're not trying. We're not. I'm not trying to become even more explosive. I'm trying to slow down a little bit so I can keep the stability in my joints. I want to do it when I'm 70.
Well, here's the other thing too. Most champions in most martial arts or any sport for that matter are genetic wonders. They are superior individuals when you think about all the people that do a particular activity or sport. The ones that rise to the pinnacle, they are extremists, extreme examples. They were born with abilities that far surpass the average person. And I always considered myself average. I just worked real hard and became above average, but certainly never at the highest levels of elite. But see, most people are right there in the middle. So trying to follow the routines of champion athletes or elite practitioners is always a mistake. Always, always, always. Many times these guys don't even know why or how they are the way they are. They could do virtually any routine, no matter how god awful, and still be better than 99% of most people. That's just the genetic wonder that they are. I'm not saying they don't work hard. I'm not trying to undermine the fact that they may go in and spend a lot of time perfecting their skills and activity. I'm just saying that if you are a person with average or even above average genetics, you're not going to get the same results. And there's a good chance that you'll burn yourself out trying to emulate what these guys are doing. And here's the thing: there was I can't remember. There was a research that said that there's a bell curve, like right here in the middle is where most people are. On this side of the bell curve, it goes down, and you have above average, high level, and then the elite. On this side, you have slightly below average, pretty poor, and then virtually motor morons. Well, 50% of the people are on this side. Less than average, very poor, or just had just no potential whatsoever. Think Woody Allen kind of physique. And then the other extreme, think of The Rock or Arnold or somebody like that. And then
Mm,
you have everyone in between. But most of us are in the middle of that bell curve, either slightly below average, slightly above average, you know, and trying to emulate the genetic elites will only leave you frustrated and injured. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, man. And once again, I'm not denigrating the genetic elite, which I was one. But for the most part, very, very few people, just a very small percent of the population is ever there. And what they can do and what they can get away with and their work capacity, their ability to recover, it's just like far, far above what most of us ever will do. And even those guys are going, many of them burn out.
for sure. They look like a lot of
You
them
don't,
look like shit after they retire.
most don't really last that long. The average NFL football player, I think the average life expectancy is in the early 60s for NFL. You can look that up, but I believe I read where it's relatively short. These guys, you know, they just take so much abuse, plus the training and the crazy weightlifting, and the concussions and brain damage and all that. So they're like the elite of the elite in the U.S. The NFL guys. Most have relatively short lifespans. Now, I'm not touting a long lifespan, having never done anything. I
Yeah,
mean, you could just basically not do anything dangerous or risky and have a long, boring life. I'm
for
not
sure.
advocating that, but my goal, Roman, is to age gracefully and not suffer. I don't want to be like my aged relatives. I mean, all anyone has to do is look at the family tree. Look at grandma, grandpa. Look at your mother and father's brothers and sisters, and look what happened to your elderly relatives. In many cases, it's not very pretty, and many of these people suffered horribly. All sorts of you know illnesses and ailments and so forth, and suffered a lot. I don't want to suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell
I
my
prefer to
students.
go to bed and not wake up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I tell my students like my goal is to remain independent until I die. Like I don't want
Yep.
some I don't mind people taking care of me, but I don't want to have people taking care of me. Most people are going to wind up in a nursing home. Also because of poor relationships, and we don't have that in the United States culture where the kids take care of the parents like they do possibly in some Eastern cultures. So
Yeah, I mean, most old elderly people get sidelined. They get shut away in some. It's like a death sentence.
yeah,
You're
exile,
put
bad.
back in a prison. But see, a lot of times it's because of people lose their independence because they lose the ability to walk. That's why it's so important to keep your muscles strong, your joints and bones strong.
Yeah. I mean, what's the number? I think the number one cause of death or like immobility is like a broken hip or something in the elderly. And they're not even sure if it breaks before they fall or after they fall.
Yeah, I mean, hip and knee replacement surgery is very common in elderly people. A lot of people, even guys at the jiu-jitsu club I go to, they're only in their late 50s, early 60s. Many of them already have had knee replacement surgery. It's like, wow. I think you can still do tough boy sports and still keep your physique and preserve it. I think jiu-jitsu at a higher level, like a higher mindedness, can be actually anti-aging and good for you. But you have to know how to roll right. You have to have the right partners. You
Yeah,
can't worry so much about uh, winning or losing. You're just in it to play the game. And I think those movement patterns on the floor and getting up and down off the floor can be really fantastic.
agreed. I mean, my main training partner is Chloe. She's a 120-pound blue belt, but when I go to academy, and I can still improve just training with Chloe, and then when I go to academies and I roll a 200-pound black belt, I don't seem to have any problems because once you understand jiu-jitsu, you don't need to sharpen your sword, as they say. You just need some blue belts to choke.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because you probably heard the story about the great Hickson Gracie bringing when they first had the Pan Ams in the U.S. I've heard this story from a couple different sources. I would have loved to have been there, but I talked to a couple of guys that were actually there. And Hickson brought in to his academy all the top level guys at that time. They're all up visiting the U.S. in California, and he lined up 10 of the best black belts in the world. I heard that number 10. I don't know if it was or not, but this is the story I heard from a guy that was there. And he basically just called each one out and pretty much spanked each guy. And these were the top level guys at the time, like a who's who. And as a matter of fact, it must have been very emotional because when the guy was telling the story, his voice cracked. He got like real emotional. Apparently, it was like just this phenomenal event to watch that kind of genius at work on the mat. And the way when Hickson came to Santa Monica, he only had like, his students, white belts, blue belts, maybe a purple belt if he was lucky. And the way he kept his sword sharp was he would just let them have every good position on him, every position. Take his back with hooks. He would go one arm in his belt, sometimes no arms to defend himself. So he'd have these, and some of his guys were athletic, just not knowledgeable. But he'd give him the mount. He'd give him a partially closed triangle. Already put himself in omoplata. Uh, you know, passing the guard only on the ground. Uh, Stuff like that. Pass the guard with one arm, which is really hard. And apparently, that type of training where he handicapped himself, he was able to best the absolute top guys in the world at that time.
Yeah.
So, you can take someone like a Chloe or one of your students, and you can keep very, very sharp.
Yeah. I
Just
mean,
put yourself in compromised positions all the time.
that's what we do, right? And the worse they are, the more compromised the position, right? Because then they get to improve too. Because when you go to and that's what I think most academies are missing out in the world today, where it's the the bell curve is very like there's really good people and then there's not really good people and nobody really knows how they got good. They just like what's the answer in jiu-jitsu? Oh, coach, I want to improve, keep training. Oh, I'm injured, keep coming in and training. I'm having problems with my wife, train more. Where it's just like I don't think more is always better, right? Which I think that better is better.
Better is better.
Exactly.
Yeah, I call it junk training. Yeah, it's just as in physical culture. Once you get past a certain amount of training, uh, any more than what's necessary actually works against you because it just impedes your recovery ability. And if you're training with any kind of intensity, and we know that in physical culture, intensity uh, is very important. And the more intense the training is, the less frequency that you can endure. So a small amount of really hard work is all that's necessary for physical culture. But
Mhm.
when it comes to skill training, frequent is better. But here's the problem with jiu-jitsu. There is a strength fitness component to it. It is strenuous. You can burn yourself out big time, man,
Yeah.
training too often. So I tell guys, if you're training much more than 4 times a week, you're probably starting to get like negative results, or at least, you know, you're not going to improve yourself too much. Seems like between 3 and 4 times a week seems to be ideal. Yes, I've heard of these phenoms that train every day, twice a day, you know, and a
But
lot
they're
of them
also on
end up
steroids.
crippled and arthritic. Well, that's another thing too, another
Everybody's
factor.
openly on steroids now. The highest level competitors are saying that they are on steroids. Why? Well, because they can be. If there's no rules against it, then why
Fast,
would you not be?
faster recut, faster recovery, uh, allows you to train more often. Yes, training more often will definitely enhance your skill sets, but you can't do it without burning it out. But if you're taking these performance enhancing drugs, yes, absolutely, your recovery is greatly amplified. The problem is there is a big price to be paid, and
Yeah.
a lot of people like to, completely forget about that aspect of it, or pretend it doesn't exist, or even deny it. But there's plenty of evidence to suggest there's no free lunch.
No, they're just selling tomorrow for today.
And then they're thinking, oh, well, you know, I don't want to live past 70 anyway. But when they get to be in their 60s, they're thinking, fuck, wish I would have paid a little bit more attention to my health and my longevity. And
If if you can go back in time and talk to yourself when you're 30, 35, maybe even 25, or maybe even 40, what would you tell yourself to do different?
I take things a lot less seriously. You know, the problem today will be completely forgotten in a year or two. Getting upset about stuff. I would definitely have that talk with myself. And ultimately, uh, a lot of these ideas we have and goals just aren't that important. We put so much importance on it. What's important, I think, is being kind and gentle and good to the people around you and trying to help your fellow your fellows out.
Yeah. And
I think
also to
that's
yourself.
and to yourself. But by helping others, you help yourself to an
For
extent.
sure.
But yeah, uh, those type of things. Not so much emphasis on you know physical culture and all that, because ultimately it's just not that important.
For sure.
Not compared to your soul.
Agreed. Agreed. What do you think most people in physical culture are missing?
Well, nowadays it's all about size and strength. It's all about being ripped and shredded, and you know, it's not really about health. I know some well-known fitness people, very well built, but man, it seems like these guys are sick all the time. They're missing something. Their vital energy is down. They're everyone's so protein crazy. Everyone's all about building mass and size and strength. Yes, muscular size is important, but it's not the be all end all. And in the end, you're going to lose it all anyway. So devoting your whole life to this egotastic size, bigger, stronger, look at me, you know, it just seems like they're really missing the point. And I would say most people are really overtraining too much. Either they don't train enough or at all. That's probably the vast majority. And then the people that do train way too often, way too frequently, and are just burning themselves out. What happened to that middle of the road? You don't see that too much anymore in anything.
In anything. Exactly. Exactly. What's your nutrition like now? Has it changed since?
Yeah, uh, I started reading different protocols. Unfortunately, our food supply has been very damaged with pollution. And it's hard to find uh, food that has not been tainted with herbicides, pesticides, chemically enhanced fertilizers,
Antibiotics?
acid rain, all sorts of, yeah. I mean, it's just so many chemicals and dangerous chemicals. And so finding good food that has been organically grown and uh, just regular soil that has not been enhanced with all sorts of chemicals is hard. You have to go out of your way. You have to go out of your way. So we do. Luckily, here in South Carolina, there's a lot of organic farms. It's a good growing season down here. People produce really, really nice vegetables and fruits. I would say that the majority of my diet is predominantly vegetables and animal proteins, mostly root vegetables that grow underground, because I know for the most part they're fairly pollution free. I stopped eating raw vegetables and salads, mostly cooked. 18 to 21 different cooked vegetables, sometimes all in the same meal. You put them in a big pot, steam them, and then lately, you might want to try this. I we had a client that had a dental problem, so we suggested they puree it. You know, like carrots, rutabaga, 4 different kinds of onions. Uh, I said rutabaga, parsnips, turnips, red cabbage, sometimes broccoli, sometimes asparagus. On and on. Anyway, that's all in there. But now Teresa's taken this hand mixer and she mashes it after steaming it, and then she mixes it into like a baby food.
I love
It's
it.
absolutely delicious. I love it, man. It's so delightful. I never get tired of eating it. And she'll put different stuff. Like last night, she had beets in it, which beets are strong, and
Hmm.
the beets give it like a nice red color and give it a kind of a different taste. But the night before, there was parsnips, which are kind of a little sweet, along with the carrots and onions. It was kind of an orangey color. Really, really good, man. And then I'll cycle between, I have one good protein meal a day. And I cycle organic eggs from chickens that are, or free range chickens. Uh, Usually lamb. I started eating liver again, beef liver, along with organic grass fed beef. Oh, of course, chicken, free range chicken. I like to eat chicken.
Nice.
Usually there's 4. Occasionally venison if I can get it. But usually, yeah, the lamb, beef, chicken, eggs 1 day a week. I usually have 5, 6 eggs, organic. And sometimes I mix a little cheese with that. Breakfast is always some form of soured milk, either yogurt or goat milk cheese. Today I had buttermilk.
Hmm.
I had stopped eating fruit for a long time, but I found some good organic fruit. So this week, 1 day I had some organic peaches with my yogurt, big tablespoon of pea pollen sprinkled on that sucker.
Nice.
This morning I had blueberries with buttermilk. The buttermilk was like a runny yogurt. I just dumped the blueberries in there, mixed it with a little bee pollen, a little bit of raw honey,
Nice.
and that was a nice light breakfast. And then supper is also the same vegetable batch left over for lunch, and then I mix it with these little blue corn nuggets that Teresa roasts in the oven, and sometimes blue corn chips that are baked, not fried. We crush it and sprinkle it on. Sometimes a couple kale chips and a big tablespoon of almond butter.
Nice.
That's nice. And it's not that much actually. It sounds like a lot, but it's just a bowl and it's just mostly vegetables on a fiber. So 3 meals, usually 5, 6 hours apart. I'll obviously after my evening meal, which is over around 6, I won't eat again till the next morning to around 9. So 11, 12 hours. Uh, that's more than that. It's like 13 or 14 hours of not eating. So that's my intermittent fast
I
all
love it.
night long to the next morning.
I
But
love it.
breakfast is usually real light. So I'm pretty damn hungry. I'm hungry by lunch. And a lot of times I'll eat the breakfast, go to jiu-jitsu, train. So I'll be even more hungry.
I love it. What else have you studied? I know you've traveled the world. You were a nomad for I'm not sure how many years, but a very significant time.
Yeah.
So
Long time.
you are nomad learning, teaching, sharing. What are some of the other things that you've studied on your travels?
Well, I became very enamored with Russian martial arts. Now, this started early. After my college wrestling days, I wrestled Division One, NCAA, all through college, and it was pretty darn good. My dual meet record my senior year was 18-2-1. That was at D1 schools, so the guys were no slouches. I usually would burn out by tournament time, though. Didn't have a good tournament. I wasn't a tournament wrestler, more like an individual match kind of guy. But I think if I would have had the nutrition habits I have now, man, I wish I knew then what I know now about proper eating and taking care of myself. At any rate, after college and after teaching school, I got involved with a sambo club in North Philly. That was real interesting to me. It was basically Russian judo, and I liked it a lot. Uh, Very similar to BJJ, very similar to wrestling, and very similar to judo. Kind of like elements of all those things. But it was kind of hard to maintain that because it was quite a drive, to get there during rush hour traffic, an I-95 corridor, in Philly. So it kind of got old. So I would go up to the college, Drexel or Penn, and I'd roll with some of those guys. But wrestling's a young man sport, man. By the time I was in my 30s, shit, I was like, it's just too slow, just off, man. These young college wrestlers. And I just felt like I was damn near injured. So I started messing around with Kempo karate, and I had a very good Kempo karate instructor, and I liked it. I did. But, I could see the limitations. And then I had a guy that was a member of my gym for a while when I opened up my own place, and he was teaching us Japanese karate. That was also interesting, but I felt like there was something missing. And then around 89, I went to first seminar the Gracie's had on the East Coast. There I fell in love. I said, this is it, man. This is what I want to know. And then I just bought a lot of mats, stuck them in my gym. I just opened my gym that year. And I had like a little area in the back, like a 10 by 20 mat. And I get my old college chums in there and you know, I just show what I learned at the seminar. And then I bought all the videotapes. And then I started going out to California. They didn't even have a gym in those days. The first couple lessons were in Horian's garage. And then it just kept building up. I come back, practice, practice, practice. Pretty soon I had so many guys, I had to expand my little operation. It wasn't really a school because I wasn't qualified to teach or anything. I just shared the information and we just practiced what we knew. And I opened up the whole upstairs. It was like 1,500 square feet. And I would just go and buy these used mats, uh, wrestling mats, and you could get them pretty cheap because colleges, high schools, they would get rid of their old mats, and there was brokers where you could buy the used mats, and I had the whole place matted up, walls padded, and we started some serious training. At one point, we had like almost 250 guys up there. Not all at once, but I mean on the book.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wasn't even charging like $20 a month or some ridiculous mat fee. But we would just practice, and of course, I kept going out to California and coming back. And then I brought the Gracies to Philly, and then they would stay with me. Hoist lived with me for a month one time, and I would bring Horian for a week or two, and then Hoist was coming all the time, and then Hoyan would send his brother Helson, who stayed with us for like a month at a time, and I would just practice with him every day, private lessons, private lessons, private lessons. So that saved me from going out to California all the time. But I still went out. I'd go out for 2 weeks at a time, every couple months. It was expensive. I went through a lot of money, a lot of money. Plus the money I wasn't making as a personal trainer when I was gone. So, it wasn't those, it wasn't a small sacrifice to learn. And then eventually, I went up to the belt ranks and got my rank, and we were full fledged, full on. And we called ourselves Max and Sons. And it was almost everyone in the Eastern Seaboard got their start through me, my school. It was the very
Incredible.
first academy on the East Coast before anybody else. Even Henzo and John Donaher and all these famous guys, they were nowhere to be found. Not back in those days, man. Not in the early '90s. And then, of course, when the UFC, I was an investor in the original UFC. I didn't have much money, but I put what money I had, my ex-wife and I, and we had ringside seats to the first 4 UFC. And then when Hoist pulled out and Horian sold his interest, I sold my interest too. Should have kept my money in there, man. So I didn't lose it, and I didn't make any either. I pretty much got back what I put in. But that was so exciting back in those early UFC, and it pretty much put Gracie Jiu Jitsu on the map. All of a sudden, people saw this element that had been missing, because they really were real fights. I mean, it's not like UFC today where they wear the gloves, the referees will stand you up, there's rounds, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's illegal. In those days, you could punch in the groin, elbow in the groin, punch to the back of the head and the neck, elbow in the back of the head and neck. You could do everything. You could bend fingers. The only thing they agree not to do is poke eyes and to bite. But you can punch a guy dead in the balls, man. That was all fair game, man. You could stomp a guy on the ground. The up kick was completely legal from any position. If you're in my guard and I can get my feet free, nowadays you cannot do it if a guy has a knee on the ground. But that's a very powerful tool. You know, it was a lot of the best aspects of jiu-jitsu. What really handicapped the jiu-jitsu man the most, and the reason these rules were put in there was, in truth, the grapplers would have pretty much won everything. I think the way the old rules were, like no rules. Oh, and yeah, if you went to the ground, no one stood you up. There was no time limit. You just went until someone quit. It was brutal.
They took away all the excuses.
Well, they did. And then when the gloves came and they stand you up, they did the rounds. You weren't allowed to do this and that and the other thing. Okay, I understand. If you're gonna make it a sport, you got to keep it safe. But back in the old days, like if someone had a triangle, you could stand up and smash them on their head, man. Even jiu-jitsu tournaments, you could do that. If I got caught in an arm lock or triangle, I could pick you up and smash you. And if you weren't smart enough to let go, well, too bad. But there's a bunch of upper neck injuries, and I understand they wanted to make it a sport. But a lot of the younger guys practicing the sport, they kid themselves when it comes to the realism. They kid
Agreed.
themselves.
Agreed.
And so many guys, because of the rules, it doesn't really favor takedowns that much. A lot of guys don't know throws or takedowns. They'll just bump fists and sit, you know? It's kind of like I specialize in ground fighting, but I don't know how to take it to the ground. How do they think they're going to fare in any kind of realistic encounter, man? With the
Agreed.
Gracie system, which I like, they really emphasize stand up self defense. And it's real old school. I mean, you can go to judo books, even in the 1800s, early 1900s, and find basically the same stand up technique that Gracie's are showing with a little Brazilian flair and wrinkle. Elio made it more user friendly to smaller, weaker people, but basically same techniques, old school. But a lot of guys don't know any of that at all, man. Zero.
Agreed.
And I get it. You know, if you're a peaceful guy and you've never been in a fight, don't plan on being in a fight, that's cool. But I don't know. Coming from where I did and get my ass beat a lot as a little weak kid, I just always had this desire to be able to defend myself, handle myself.
Agreed. Agreed. I mean, it's definitely missing. It's definitely missing. That they just became specialists in a lot of ways, like Kung Fu did, where they're like, okay, now this art is specifically for wrist locks. This art is specifically for this, and it takes the teeth out of the actual combat element of it. So
It
I mean,
definitely does.
I've traveled the world. I've trained with a lot of black belts in jiu-jitsu, and I've yet to meet many that aren't crippled. Why do you think that is the case?
Overtraining. There's this idea that you just can't train enough. And a lot of these guys just push themselves to the point where their joints are just aching all the time. And many of them are not eating very well either. I mean, they think they're eating well, but they they emphasize too much fruit and not enough alkaline foods, and they end up very imbalanced, very imbalanced. Unfortunately, so much of our food supply has been destroyed. You know. Oh,
Agreed.
there's one other thing I forgot to mention. You asked what I had learned. I meant to mention I got really interested in Systema. I spent about 8 years really breaking it down. I went to Russia 8 times, and I trained with some really high level Systema masters. I had also gone to Toronto, stayed up there 3 months, and trained with that guy Vladimir Vassiliev. And what I learned was there's a whole bunch of different types of Systema. It's not all Ryabko Systema, which is what Vladimir does up in Toronto. Uh, a lot. Ryabko was a controversial guy because, first of all, he was really fat, big. Oh, he, he was very powerful. You know, never underestimate a fat guy because this guy's can punch, man. With all that mass. I had his 1 inch punch and he sent me flying. Very painful. So, I mean, the guy could hit. And he really learned to economize movement so that because he was so obese, he didn't have to do much. But I mean, he wasn't a fake guy at all. I mean, I don't know what I would do against a guy like that. You know, even with jujitsu, I think he'd be hard to get in the ground for a guy my size.
What stood out to you with Systema?
Well, then I went to Moscow and I trained this guy. Uh, he was teaching Izvor, which Izvor, I'm probably mispronouncing it. You speak Russian, but I believe Izvor means pure waters or source. Izvor.
Maybe I'll ask him.
Yeah, Izvor. Anyway, uh, Michael Gruden, very good teacher. Taught me a lot of really good stuff. And then I got interested in this guy, Alexei Kadeshnikov, and I went to Kiev and trained with this Colonel Maximsov, and I liked him. And I liked his very military oriented. And then from there, I went to Krasnodar and studied with Kadeshnikov himself and his son, Arkady. Very cool stuff, man. Awesome movement patterns on the ground, all combat oriented. So I had, and I also went to the Ryabko Systema place in Moscow. It was in a police station. Talk about intimidating. It was like going to putting yourself in jail, man. There was this big, wall, and you would go in this little vestibule, and there was like a booth with like armed cops, and of course they didn't speak English, but they basically knew what I was there for, and they'd buzz you in through this grate, and then when you're inside, you were in there, dude. But the training was cool, man. And when I was training there, the U.S. ambassador was actually taking lessons. That guy was pretty cool, man. You know, a politician, the ambassador to U.S. ambassador to Moscow. He was taking his demo, so that was cool. And he would translate for me because
Hmm.
almost no one spoke English. It's just see, monkey do. You know.
Luckily, you
But
are
I
very
did learn a lot.
kinesthetic.
It
Luckily,
was
you are
fun.
very kinesthetic and you can pick up.
Yeah, I was able to kind of watch and see, but some concepts were pretty hard without the explanation. But it was good. You know, I try to mix some of the principles of it's a very soft, relaxed martial art, very much based in breathing and breath control and relaxation. So I took the principles and tried to apply them to my jujitsu. And they also had some very interesting exercises, which were really cool. Very, very Russian.
What stood out to you about the Russian people?
Well, they're very, very stoic looking. They don't smile. You know, Americans we're taught to smile and grin all the time. I guess we look pretty goofy to them. Because, you know, if you smile at a Russian for no reason, they wonder, like, you know, they're suspicious. Like, what's the guy laughing at?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, what's wrong with that fucking guy? What's he laughing at? You know, they take offense almost. But they're very warm and friendly once you get to know them. Very warm, very friendly. I couldn't believe how even though no one speak, very few people speak English, they would try to help you. You know, or if they didn't understand, they just just walk away. But I went to a calisthenics park, and everyone crowded around me. They were really interested. You know, I was training, they were training, and they're very curious. And I thought I went to like St. Petersburg, went to Moscow, I went to Krasnodar, I went to Novosibirsk, all different parts of the Russia, and everything was clean, virtually no graffiti. I'm sure there are some places that have it, but not much. No trash on the ground. People dress really nice, even if you're poor, even if you're a fucking bum. They dress nice, man. Even beggars would dress nice. They took pride in the way they looked. The women were absolutely gorgeous. Best looking women I've ever seen. Great looking guys, good dental palate, nice, robust. Some of them a little overweight, but you didn't see any obesity, you know. Very neat, orderly society, you know. Uh, a lot to admire. You know, Tucker Carlson did like a little clip on his trip to Moscow because, uh, lately because of politics, they've been bad mouthing Russia and trying to make out like they're evil or whatever. And he went over there, man. The stores are loaded with merchandise, fruit and vegetable stands, gasoline's cheap, people well dressed, look happy. You know, well that's the experience I had. Maybe someone has had a different experience, but for me, it was pretty nice, and I liked it. And I'm sorry that we're having all this, you know, drama with Russia right now because I'd love to go back.
Yeah,
I probably could go back without a problem. I think you just
yeah,
don't do stupid shit. You don't
for
do
sure.
stupid shit.
What do you think made you successful at what you do?
Well, I desire to always keep learning and improving. That's really important. I think you can't just get trapped and think you just have all the answers. Because I've had many, many evolutions. Started out with the York barbell system and the old school York routines. And then I did some hybrid training. I discovered John McClellan in the old Strength and Health magazine. And then later Peter Rader. and a lot of those old time guys. And then I discovered Arthur Jones in the mid '70s. Got very much enamored with high intensity training. Trained at the first Nautilus gym in the East Coast. Actually worked there as an instructor. Then later opened up my own Hammer Strength Nautilus gym. And then I kind of went away from that. Got very much into dinosaur training, with like Brooks Kupik and those guys, which was kind of a throwback to the way I trained in high school. And then I don't know, just always evolving. Tried the mace bell, club bell, kettlebell thing, some of the traditional Hindu wrestler training, and kind of came back full circle. Realized that I think I was on the right track in the first place with the high intensity training, and kind of a few years ago returned pretty much to isometrics and bodyweight training. Mostly because I just didn't want to be gym dependent. If I had a good hammer strength place, I might use some of the equipment. And then, of course, I've always been interested in esoteric things like yoga. I've studied Qigong, health routines, Qigong has been very powerful. The Russian Slavic health system with the breath work and a lot of the mobility work that they do, which is all part of their martial art. I incorporated a lot of that stuff into my routine. And I've always been interested in alternative health practices. I've used acupuncture, acupressure like shiatsu. I never really did believe in doctors. My brother died early when he was just a very young man due to misdiagnosis. I always had a morbid fear and distrust of doctors. My mother was sickly, and I saw the doctors as only a negative. I saw her getting sucked into the whole medical, you know, taking drugs, more pills, you know, it's just a bad way to go. So I decided I didn't want to be dependent on the medical system. So I looked at all these alternative health systems. So aside from the strength training, I have like a daily regimen of the Russian Slavic health and Qigong that I've mixed together, studied all this stuff, certain yoga postures and positions.
Yeah, that'll definitely add to longevity and success. I think
I think
Chris Howder said, "It's not who's best, it's who's left."
who's left. Well, he's right about that, man. Because, like I said, there's not many guys that started as long as I did and are still in the game. Okay, I've seen guys. I said this recently, an 83-year-old who's a third-degree black belt. God bless him, but I guarantee he hasn't been doing it, since he was in junior high school, grappling, and
For sure.
he just started. So
For sure.
sometimes you see these guys in their 70s, but they start really late.
Yeah. And people
And
treat you differently. People treat you
then they
differently when you start late.
they do, as they should,
For sure.
But here's the thing: they shouldn't fool themselves into thinking they know something. They don't.
Yeah, you're
And many of them are following the lead and starting to incorporate all this crazy stuff that so many young guys do, and then they find themselves all fucked up, and then they have to quit, like within just a few years.
yeah. Having 50,000 miles on your engine versus 1 million miles on your engine is very different things. Very different things.
Different thing.
Without replacements, without any issue. Yeah, like it's very rare.
No surgery, no joint replacements. Now, I have to admit, right shoulder is somewhat limited, but it has gotten better and has gotten worse. Right now, this alkaline diet I'm on, it's feeling pretty good.
This is a big question. As a wise elder, uh,
well, thank you.
well, you are. We don't have a lot of wise elders in our society, period. Like there's not a lot of There isn't. I mean, realistically, holistically speaking, there might be some 70-year-old rabbis or priests that are still talking and kind of have acuity and sharpness, but realistically, like none of them are physically capable of doing anything. It's very rare to meet a man that has taken care of his body and created longevity and created a life, not just for for the rat race, but a life that you created consciously for how you wanted to live. If you were to leave a message as a wise elder for the next generations, what would you tell them?
Wow. Well, that's a I just can't think of anything right now. I mean, I'm sure I could think of an answer. I suppose, and you've heard this many times. It sounds kind of trite. I mean, you only have this one life in this particular reality. I do believe that I do believe in reincarnation, even though I'm a Christian. I do believe that. I do believe that we may be having many incarnations all at once. If you want to get into that quantum mechanics thing. But I would say guard your health. It's your most precious aspect. Don't dissipate yourself. So many young people dissipate themselves, and then by the time they're middle age, it's almost too late. They've gotten themselves with some real over fat or obesity problems. Uh, they just haven't taken care of themselves. They're having all these breakdowns. Start when you're young. Take care of yourself. Treat your body and your health as as your most precious possession. Way more important than making a lot of money. Not that money isn't important. It is. But don't sacrifice your health to make money or for anything for that matter. Even for sports glory, by taking definitely harmful drugs and all this kind of stuff. A lot of people have said that in the past, but it is true. It's absolutely true. Health, number one possession. Take care of that first. And then everything else will kind of fall into place. Because it's hard to be kind or generous or magnanimous or even make a living when you're constantly battling health problems. Hard to have a good relationship with a significant other. Hard to take care of your kids if you're always battling illness or feeling really like crap. So I guess make your health your number one priority, even to the point of maybe sacrificing in some other area.
Agreed. Agreed.
There's been many a billionaire that on their deathbed would have given everything up just to have a few more years. I don't want to have any regrets. I want to go to my death, no regret. I've made some boners. I've mistreated some people. I've done some bad things, mistakes. I've forgiven myself, and whether they've forgiven me or not is beside the point. But I've forgiven myself, and so I don't have any bad feelings going into this last couple of decades of my life. So that's a very important thing too, to make peace with yourself first. Forgive everyone, and if people choose to forgive you, that's really nice too. But it's important to forgive yourself for past mistakes and not hold on to that stuff because we've all done it. We've all made huge, huge boners, really screwed up. It happens, but you can't hold on to that. You got to let it go, man.
Yes. Well, thank you. Yeah. That's a very powerful message, I think, for anyone listening, whether they're 99 or 199 or 29. Because if they can learn that early, or if you learn that late, I mean, what a beautiful way to live. to live without regrets, without negative energy towards yourself or others, and in good health. I mean, you can create anything that way. I can keep doing this for days. I can talk to you forever.
Yeah,
Um,
unfortunately, I'm starting. Yeah, I have something else coming up. I
Same.
can talk to you all day. We'll do it again.
For sure. Thank you so much for your sharing, your knowledge, your wisdom, your energy. Thank you for being a light out in the world and just a bright light that shines for people to be able to model. Because, like I said, we don't have a lot of wise elders in our society. And that's, I believe, wise elder male, right? Wise elder males in our society. And it's an honorable position to occupy. And it's also something that's necessary because we are lost as a society, as a civilization, especially as men. There's a lot of weak men out there, and not just weak physically, but weak emotionally, weak psychologically, and most importantly, weak spiritually without a road to follow. So thank you for being you. Thank you for taking care of you. And I hope that we get to experience you for many decades to come, many, many decades to come. This has been an honor for me. So thank you,
Well,
Professor.
thank you. Appreciate it a lot.